On a Sunday Not So Casual Thursday afternoon in October. It is October 19th, 2023, the pilot episode of the Shark and Junior Brown United States International, an opportunity to dominate. We're going to talk a lot of basketball on the show. Welcome to the first episode. We're excited to bring you content all year. Junior, what's going on, brother?
What's going on, brother? We've been talking about doing a show for a while. I'm glad it's finally here. I'm not about a lot of long talking, so I'm sorry I'm in an office setting, just working on some NFL stuff in the studio next to me. But I ain't gonna let that stop me from getting on board with my guy Shark and talking some basketball. So let's get to work whenever you're ready, brother.
Absolutely. So excited to get in here. It's been a long summer, and it will be 7.5 months of work, grind, and conversation. I'm going to drop a bunch of plays on this broadcast. Junior's going to chat about personnel, coaching changes, and everything that's going on in the league. Of course, a lot of turnover this year. Let's start in the Atlantic Division. I have in my notes, and I think it's a great talking point to jump off of, extreme parity. Not one team in this division finished under 500 last year, which was one of two divisions in the sport that did not have a team under 500. We do expect some southward movement this year from Brooklyn and Toronto, but I want to throw it to Junior for some opening comments on this division: Boston, Philly, and New York.
You want me to talk about those teams specifically?
Yeah, just in general, what do you think about in terms of Boston? Let's start off with that. The personnel changes. Marcus Smart goes over to Memphis. Porzingis in, and some moving parts there.
So I just think that, if you're a team that loses that many players that played significant, I think there has to be an element of like the unknown, right? So like, you see most people saying that Boston is either one or two in the East, which is fair, what I'm saying? Because really Milwaukee's their main contender. I personally have Milwaukee at one. I feel like more people have Boston at one. I'm curious to hear what you're going to say because we haven't discussed any of this stuff. So this is one of the benefits of doing the show, getting to bounce stuff off each other. Boston at two is because, like I said, just the guys that they lost, Grant Williams, Brogdon, et cetera, they replaced four players with two. So that means that other guys that are currently on the roster are going to have to step up. I think OJ Brissett is going to have to take a leap. And we don't really know what he's going to look like in an environment where expectations are much higher than they've ever been in his career. So I think Boston's obviously going to be there. I think that I'm a big person, and I'm sure you are too. When I look to back any team, I pick continuity over – I value, I should say, continuity over most things. And they have continuity because Brown and Tatum have grown up together and have, they literally took every step. Conference semifinals, conference finals. So they should be ready to go to the next level. But again, we don't know what Kristaps is in this role because we saw Kristaps as a number 2 in Dallas, and he literally used to be pouting on the court, in my opinion. So I'm curious to hear what you think of this Boston outlook for the season.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think numerically, which is where I always jump off of, because I like to see what the books think of the environment, and then I react to them, and I say, okay, that's why they're thinking that angle. Boston finished last year with 57 wins, and they're graded at 54.5. So books are expecting pretty much the same storyline and the same results from this group. But I think, as Junior mentioned, the psychology of this group has completely shifted. When you remove Marcus Smart off the roster, he was their 1A guy emotionally. Tatum and Brown, both superstars, not the voice in the group. And I think this is potentially why he was moved, actually. I think maybe
less. I don't want to interrupt you. Just want to kind of add to what you're saying. Yeah. I've read reports that there were times during the season where he would literally take over the huddle. Like he would just talk over the coach and just take over the huddle like he was in charge. So I think he had way too much power, and Tatum and Brown needed him gone just to take that step as leaders. But sorry, go ahead.
No, you're completely right. And feel free to cut in. This is a free-flowing conversation. And I completely and utterly agree. And it's their opportunity now to really get into, I would say, for lack of a better word, the adulthood of their NBA career, where they're the leaders, they're the voice. They've never had the opportunity to do it, crazily enough. He's always been there, a bit of an umbrella in terms of energy with this group. So you're going to see a freedom for sure. We'll see how they do. I mean, I think, Junior, one thing that's slightly interesting about psychology is that, you can't necessarily just transform yourself into a great leader. It's largely born into you. And Smart, for this conversation, he is a born leader. He has that fire. He has that juice. Tatum and Brown both a little bit underspoken, not necessarily the most fiery guys. So I do wonder who's going to be the juice in this locker room because, of course, Joe Mazzulla is not bringing that from the head coaching position at all. If Udoka was still here, he could have definitely given them that energy and that focus point. But as you mentioned, Kristaps Porzingis comes over here in Dallas. He was very unhappy. This will be a different environment for him. I think it's good for him to get back to the Northeast. He obviously started his career with the Knicks. He performed very well. You talk about an energy shift. You get back into that Northeast market. He loved that crowd in New York. He didn't like the franchise. He didn't like James Dolan. He didn't like what they were doing, but he liked the energy in the gym. And it's going to be that way in Boston on a nightly basis. I think he will react much better and totally undocumented, at least as far as I know, but something that I've always speculated upon. I always felt like there was a bit of a clash between Luka and Kristaps, two European guys. Who knows exactly what's going on demographically and culturally. Just they're 1 and 1A. And I think that they kind of had to maybe prove to each other that I'm bigger than you. And I don't think that will exist with Tatum, Brown, Porzingis, and these other guys. So I like the move. I think he'll be playing a lot more freely. I think he'll be playing a lot more confidently. And I think, again, the energy of Boston will jolt him back up to where he started his career with the Knicks. Let's just continue down this. Speaking of the Knicks are hovering here in the middle. Knicks did finish last year 10 games behind Boston in the East. They were in the playoffs. Obviously, they did win a playoff series. Best Knicks campaign in a long time. The Knicks should build on that momentum. But I think that this division, in terms of the mobility, is not necessarily going to tell us a deep story. Junior, let me ask you a couple of questions regarding this. What do you think in terms of the Knicks' prognostication this year? You think they're going to move up, down, stay the same, or where are we going with this?
I'm sorry, I was on mute there. I know that's your squad. So here's my problem with the Knicks, right? The Knicks, there's a couple of things that I don't love about the Knicks. First of all, I just got to admit, I'm not a Julius Randle guy. I do recognize that he's improved. I recognize that he's taken his opportunity, with the Knicks and really shown what he can do. I just find his brand of basketball extremely frustrating. So if he's your number 2, just in my personal opinion, and Knicks fans, including yourself, Shark, you might disagree, I think that caps your ceiling. I think if Jalen Brunson can continue to show what he showed last year, because I was a little bit skeptical that he could handle the role, but I think even what he did in the FIBA World Championships a little bit showed me that he's just a natural alpha guy. But he's got to get some help. Again, I'm not saying that Julius Randle is not doing enough, but if you're talking about taking a step up, I think Julius is who he is, and I don't think there is a step up for him to take. So he's either going to stay the same or get worse. That depends totally on him, because his problem is not ability. His problem is between his ears. His shot selection, to me, is among the worst in the league. But again, when you're talking about getting the best version of Julius Randle, and if he can somehow take another step, then yeah, they can do a little bit better. But I don't think there's just much room for them to go up. I'm pretty sure the Knicks had literally no rookies get any type of significant minutes that I can think of, and that's something I always look for in a team. So when I look to where are they going, I don't really know. Hopefully, quickly can bounce back from the poor playoffs that he had, but I just think they're probably more likely to be the same than not. I don't want to be pessimistic and say they're going to have a huge drop, because the East, they're in like a bubble or in a tier with like 3-4 other teams, and they're at the top of that tier, I think, in my opinion. Like, I think a lot of people assume the Cavs are just going to bounce back and do what they did last year. I could see the Knicks being better than the Cavs, for example, in the East. So I don't know if I even answered your question properly. I guess I'm trying to say I really actually don't know what's going to happen in New York. And I think a lot of it depends on Julius Randle.
I agree with you, and I think you made a great point about.
By the way, sorry, Shark, because I didn't mention him. As a Canadian guy who kind of watched RJ Barrett since he was a high school kid, his trajectory has been extremely disappointing. He was extremely disappointing for Team Canada as well. I don't want to start shitting on him because I feel like that's like the easy thing to do. But at some point, he has to get himself at least to the point where he's an average shooter. He's one of the worst shooters among starting players or among players that get any significant minutes. And again, that actually probably holds them back more than Julius Randle. I just think that Julius Randle has already shown us high-end play. He just hasn't shown us that consistently. So, they just need more consistency.
Oh, I completely agree. And as you mentioned, RJ Barrett has struggled with his shot. I mean, ever since he's been in the public eye, he's clearly never learned to shoot. I mean, the guy's so athletic. He's so good off the dribble. He just never was mechanically that sound. He has improved. He's obviously very streaky from the three-point line specifically. But with Julius, you made the comment, what's going on between the ears? And you remember this going back a couple seasons ago. Actually, it was the pandemic season. The Knicks were great at home. And then when they came back the next year with fans in the arena, they were not very good at home. And I think that's deeply psychological. They were good when there was no big New York energy in the building. And then the minute New York energy got in the building, they got stressed out. They couldn't function properly. And you saw it last year. Julius Randle had a mental health coach, a meditative coach on the sideline with him. I remember watching this, a breath coach, a visualization coach. And I think that's great for him. And I think he has improved significantly within that quotient of his being. But the books agree with you that the Knicks are pretty much capped at this point in their record. 47-35 last year. Did score the ball well, 116 points per game. That's obviously not symptomatic historically of a Tom Thibodeau style of basketball. But books are downgrading them mildly from 47 wins to 44.5. Same thing they did with Boston. And they're doing it with Philadelphia, too. They're moving Philadelphia down from 54 to 48. This is one of the only divisions where every single team is projected to win less games than last year, which is actually very, very interesting. Obviously, Brooklyn, immense roster turnover. That makes complete sense. Toronto losing some parts as well. That makes sense. But I think it is very noteworthy for those of you guys betting this. When you see Boston downgraded from 57 to 55.5, you see Philadelphia downgraded from 54 to 48.5, and you see the Knicks downgraded from 47 to 45.5. They're telling you this division is not going to be as dominant outside of the division as they were last year. And as Junior mentioned, some of these teams in the other Eastern, the other portion of the Eastern Conference are going to improve. Let's go to the Central on that. I'm going to drop my first official play of this broadcast. I'm taking the over from the Detroit Pistons, 27.5, 1 unit. And I think this is great stuff. And Junior, I'll throw it to you in a minute. Detroit Pistons last year came off of a season 2 years ago where they covered, I believe, 90% of spreads in March and April. And then last year, they capped out statistically, and they obviously lost Cade Cunningham and had a lot of moving parts in the roster. This is where they will bounce back. They get Monty Williams at coach. Monty Williams is a great developer of young talent. He's a great voice for a young group of guys. And this line is telling you an incredible, incredible story. This team finished last year with the worst record in the entire sport, 17-65. They were a whopping 41 games back in the division of Milwaukee. This is not baseball. This is not the Orioles from 10 years ago, back in the division, 50 games. This is pro basketball. It's hard to be down 41 games in your own division in 1 year, but they were. And books are moving their line total up to 27.5 off a 17-win campaign. It's a great numerical story. It speaks to northward movement. It speaks to the group getting Cade Cunningham back. His third campaign, second on court, and Monty Williams will, without question, get this group going in a positive direction. That's my first official. I'm dropping 6 on this broadcast. Junior, any comments on the Pistons?
So hold on. You said you have the over?
Over. I think this is telling significant northward movement with the Pistons this year, off the worst campaign in the whole league last year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's going to be largely predicated to Kate Cunningham's health, right? But if you can stay healthy, I see them sailing over that. If not, it'll be tight, but I still think they get over that for a couple of reasons. One, they move away from Dwayne Casey, who's a very competent head coach. He's a former NBA Coach of the Year. However, as someone who used to live in the Toronto area and knows Dwayne Casey very well, he is the literal walking definition of an old school coach. If you have a bad week of practice, he's not going to play you. You can be the star player, you can be the star draft pick. Obviously, he's not going to do this the best player on his team, but the point I'm trying to make is if you're a young player who doesn't show maximum effort, he's literally not going to give you any minutes. Anyone who used to watch Raptors games with the young Norm Powell, you see Norm Powell score 25 points and literally get a DMP the next game. And it was just down to his effort and his attitude, which is a Dwayne Casey thing. I say all of that to say this is a different generation. You can't handle these guys with the super heavy and the iron fist. You got to give these guys like a little, you almost got to make the dog wag its tail. Scratch them behind the ears a little bit, rub their back, give them a treat. Obviously, you don't want to baby these guys, but I think that Monty, who's no slouch himself, by the way, he doesn't take shit. As DeAndre Ayton, but I think that he's going to be able to relate to these guys more as young men. Him being a younger guy himself, a former player, which Dwayne Casey was not. I think that's going to lend itself to a lot to Cade Cunningham's development. And one thing I like about Monty, in my opinion, he seems like a guy who's able to develop talent. When you look at the Phoenix players before he got there and after, I think he even made Devin Booker better. He seems to be able to get the best out of young talent. I forget, my brain kind of does this sometimes. What's the left-handed backup point guard that's in Phoenix?
Campaign.
Payne.
Yeah.
Haynes has played his best basketball under Monty. A lot of guys on that roster really who didn't look like anything more than Jags. Just a guy who played to the best of their ability. I think that he can get Ivy better. I think he can get Cunningham better. I think they'll play a more modern style of basketball. If you watch how they played basketball, that's another thing with having Dwayne Casey as a head coach. He plays, a style of basketball that's more suited to 10, 15 years ago. I think that with Monty having this big long contract and not having to worry about wins, he can do his job with less pressure than a normal coach in the situation might. Because they gave him a lot of money for a long time. Because to me, and you can let me know and kick it over to you right after I say this. The contract they gave him tells me that they're like, hey, listen, Monty, you ain't gonna fix this overnight. You're still gonna be shit this season. Probably even gonna be kind of shit next season, but we're going to give you some time to get your guys in here, get rid of the guys you don't think are worth keeping, and mold this team in your image so we can take that next step forward. You know what I mean? And they have continuity with Dwayne Casey moving up in the organization. So quick, Casey's still there. There's still a structure. Monty's come in. He's got his time. He doesn't have to worry about winning right away, which is literally impossible. Bro, if they win double the amount of games, that's still only 34 wins. So he's clearly ain't going to fix that overnight. He's just trying to put his imprint and his culture so that Detroit can have some sense of direction, because it's more than half a decade now where they literally don't even have an identity, which is insane. And Detroit fans deserve better than that.
I completely agree with you 100% on every single point there. And that's why the books are moving the line up with significance. It's one of the biggest, I believe it's actually the biggest line gap from last year final result to an expected win total in the entire sport. And of course, we know this is NBA basketball. A lot of the teams just are going to hover right where they were last year. There's not a lot of changeover. This is a significant move point. And it is for Monty Williams. And Junior, last thing I'll say on Detroit, and you said it, this is just something that's nice to see in pro sports. A franchise that is actually going to trust the process with a coach and not forcibly make him do things to win now that are unrealistic for the group going forward. And, obviously in basketball, it's a little bit different than other sports, but you see just a deep, deep impatience with head coaching in every sport. And it's something that frustrates me because I'm very process oriented. And I understand you can't fix things overnight, but we do think they will fix it enough overnight to finish over 27.5 wins. That's an official play. Next official play, I'm also dropping within this division, and I think this is a key point. Most of the best futures, in my opinion, in pro basketball do usually happen with teams that were particularly bad last year that are supposed to improve. Notice we said this in the Atlantic. These top teams are kind of going to repeat in the numbers right around where they were last year. Here's another one that's not so drastic like Detroit, but we're taking the Indiana Pacers over 38.5 wins, 1 unit official. And Junior, you probably remember this last year. Indiana came out last year very good. And they were actually 4 or 5 games over 500 through, I believe, almost halfway through the year. And then they hit the wall so hard. I believe they went close to 15 to 20 games under 500 over the next 25 games. Tough scheduling on the road, some injuries, clearly fatigue, clearly overexerted. Did push back a little bit to end the year, did miss the playoffs. But when you see their final record, 35 wins, 47 losses, and books move the line up to 38.5, what they're telling you here is what you saw early season last year is more of their sustainable quality going forward. And that complete cliff dive later in the year was just fatigue, injuries, and travel. I love this spot. I think this group has immense upside. That trade going back a couple years with Sacramento has been amazing for both sides. Junior, what do you think about the Pacers this year?
I think that so in case anyone's wondering why I haven't made an official play, I don't have any official plays made, and I'm the type of dude, if I haven't been on it, I ain't going to tell you to bet on it. That being said, I'm most likely going to get involved with this number for a couple of reasons. One, they have a proper professional coach in Rick Carlisle who's really not going to accept anything other than, effort, commitment, and proper basketball, like high IQ basketball. Yeah, it's not always going to work because the talent level might not be where he needs it to be to accomplish his goals, but the effort, the preparation, just the professionalism is going to be top notch with this team, right? They got most of the same returning core as they did last year, so they got continuity going for them. Whenever I watch the Pacers, the one thing I've never thought at any point last season is like, yo, these guys just are not bringing it tonight. They bring it every single night, and that matters when you're looking at to bet a win total, right? Because the Clippers win total, for example, in past years, we're not talking about this version of them, it's always wonky because you just kind of don't know where that's going to go. That's obviously an easy example because of injuries, but I'm trying to think off the top. The Rockets, for example. If before Udoka got there, you literally, when you would tune into a Rockets game, you would have no idea what their effort would look like. If they're making shots early, the effort is sky high. If the shots are not falling early, then the effort is pretty average to below average. So I think not to go on like a rant about effort and preparation, but I think it's a solid bet and a bet that I'm willing to get involved in because I think that the Pacers have an identity. They have continuity. They have a plan. They have a leader. And I think that's going to be enough for them to get at least 41 wins, probably, to finish 500. I would think that anything less than 41 wins for them would be a very disappointing season.
I completely agree with you. And as you said, effort matters in NBA basketball. It's one of the most interesting things in pro sports, how 82 games over 6.5 months do have these motivational holes and black holes, if you will, where teams just don't show up. And it's mind-blowing.
It's the thing I hate about the Denver Nuggets, honestly. We'll get to that eventually, but
for sure. No, and as you mentioned, it was a great. We're obviously flowing through this across the league. We got different divisions, but I love these comments about the Clippers cross-referencing with the Pacers because it's like, what do they have anything to do with each other? Psychology. One side is effort big, and one side is effort small. And with the Clippers, they just chuck threes, and you're at the variance of basically effortless effort and shooting threes. And you look at the Pacers. Speaking on that, love their young group. Absolutely love Benedict Mathurin out of Arizona. Guy's an elite athlete, elite competitor. Some guys that have gotten thrown under the bus by the media over the years, Miles Turner. Say what you want about Miles Turner. He has a great NBA body and skill set. And I think he's an emotional guy that's had some ebbs and flows, highs and lows himself as he competes in his career. But I think this team has immense upside. Junior said it. We think this team will compete to get to right around 500 this year, and that will bring us over the total at 38.5. Top of this division, Junior, you were making a couple comments before we got on here about Cleveland. I don't know if you want to just talk about that briefly.
Yeah, sure. It's an Evan Mobley thing. I understand that they had a good season last year. I think, and then this is just a me thing, right? I'm not speaking for anybody else, but the me thing is when I look at a player and I'm trying to project what what step he's going to take in his career, right? So where Evan Mobley, what his ceiling is, what his floor is. What I saw in the playoffs last year from him offensively, I saw it all season offensively, but then in the playoffs, it actually regressed. If he can't learn to be just a competent, average NBA offensive player, then there's the ceiling for this team is way lower than it should be because it's clear you can't play him and Jared Allen at the same time. Not if you want to win, right? You're going to have to bring one of these guys off the bench unless somehow miraculously Mobley learns to shoot corner threes. But then, do you just want Mobley standing in the corner shooting threes anyway? You're taking away his ability to offensive rebound, first of all, if you do that, which is one of his strengths. So there's just so many things that they need to figure out. But starting right there, is Mobley going to be a starting five with him and Jared Allen kind of splitting the minutes? And that, when I say splitting the minutes, obviously Mobley's going to get the majority of the minutes, but some nights Allen just might have a favorable matchup. Some nights it might be Mobley. I don't think you should be tied to Mobley because of where you drafted him. First of all, Mobley's development is directly related to what Donovan Mitchell is about to do next. Let's just go there because Donovan Mitchell wants security, right? Like, yeah, he might want to go to this team or that team. Forget about where he wants to go. He wants money, and he wants guaranteed money. And the best place for him to get it is where he's at right now. So if they're going to convince him to sign, he has to see that it's worth signing, right? Because yeah, he cares about money, but he also has to care about his career trajectory in terms of where he is and his place among other NBA players. He seems like a guy who has a lot of pride, who wants to be the best version of himself. I have no question about his commitment to the game and his professionalism, but I do kind of question the ceiling because I just mentioned your ceiling with Mobley as an important piece. What's your ceiling with Donovan Mitchell as a one? Because he kind of fizzled out in the playoffs again last year, which is not the first time. Now we saw Bubble Mitchell go nuts, and I'm not saying that he isn't one of the top, clearly one of the best shooting guards in the league, clearly a top 10 to 15 player. I would say probably closer to 15 player in the league. But again, it's about what can he do to make his team better, and what this team needs from him is in the postseason. So for me, I'm not judging him in the regular season. I'll start judging him in April. In the regular season, I need Mobley to take that next step, or they're gonna get worse. That's just in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. The books are kind of agreeing and kind of disagreeing. The books have this last year 51 and 31. Books have them graded at 50 and a half. So they're telling you basically they're going to repeat the exact same record. And as you mentioned, I think your argument does speak more to playoffs. You saw it last year. They really struggled against the Knicks and really just couldn't get the ball moving, couldn't get any sort of flow. And the games were really kind of, the life was sucked out on the physicality. And you mentioned, Donovan Mitchell. Obviously, kid grew up in Westchester, New York, Louisville, out in Utah. But I think an interesting point is really just did he excel in the West because the West is more of a wide open style of game. And now you're going to get beat more in the East. You're going to get hit. The refereeing's obviously a little bit different, particularly when you get into May. And I think that the question mark is when you get into May with this team, because I think they're clearly graded to be another top five team in the East. And this is a very top heavy division with the Bucks. We're not going to spend too much time on the Bucks. I mean, anybody that listens to mainstream media will hear them tell you Damian Lillard and Giannis are going to win the title. We'll let that be speculation. And let's move on to the Southeast. Southeast Division has a great conversation behind it, in my opinion. A lot of young teams, a lot of movement. Washington obviously acquiring Jordan Poole, obviously moving Bradley Beal. Hornets in complete disarray. Magic, I think, have significant upside. Hawks and Heat, really interesting conversation. Junior, let's talk about this division. What are your thoughts on Orlando, Atlanta, and Miami?
I'll start with Miami. Trying to predict what Miami's going to be is it's an exercise in futility. What are you even really predicting? Their range of outcomes might be the widest in all of the major professional sports if we're just being realistic, right? Because if you told me they finished first or second in the East, I would be surprised, but I wouldn't say no way. I would say, oh yeah, If you told me that they were going to be fighting for a playing spot, I could believe that too. They obviously lost some important pieces to their championship team, but it kind of seems like next man up always in Miami. But at some point, guys, at some point, Jimmy Butler, his body has been breaking down for half a decade. He always seems to make it work in the playoffs, but you even saw in the playoffs he started running out of steam, which happened when they went to the finals, which happens kind of everywhere, right? So who's his Robin? And listen, no disrespect to Bam Adebayo to me can't be the second best player on a championship team. He can prove me wrong. He absolutely can, and he's not a guy who I would feel comfortable betting against. But our job when we, as cappers, is to make educated guesses as to what's going to happen in the future, right? And if I had to put my money on it, I'm not sure I can see a team lifting a trophy with Bam as the second best player unless the best player on the team is one of the five best in the league, which Jimmy is not. And people probably get mad that I just said that. And playoff Jimmy was amazing. Go look at the stats properly. He was amazing for like half the playoff games, and then the others he was average to below average, and that's just a fact. And that's no disrespect to Jimmy. There's only so much one guy could really do, right? So I think that the not getting Dame puts them in a spot where they now need to start figuring out, okay, so where are we going in the future? Can Tyler Hero get past the fact that you were trying to get him out of town and be professional and perform to the level that you expect? Because Tyler Hero, as good as he is, he's pretty up and down, right? Consistency is not been his thing. I think he has all star potential, but even that has its ceiling. Like even if he were to become an all star, I think his ceiling is pretty low because on the other side of the court, defensively, he can be had. You can get at him. He might give you 20, but his man probably going to give you like 15. So Miami is one of those teams where I'm going to try and stay away from predicting what they're going to do until playoffs start. I like Orlando's roster a lot. They have too many guards. They got to figure out the way it's looking. Cole Anthony might be the odd man out there because as much as people love to hate on Fultz over the last couple of years, if you actually watch basketball, he was their best guard last year, in my opinion. Anyways, not to say that Cole Anthony is significantly worse, but you're going to have to pay Cole Anthony at some point. And what's the point of that? You're already paying Markel. You might as well just give those monies to Markel and see if you can get something in return for Cole Anthony, if that's me personally. I think Franz Wagner is a baller. I think he can actually take another step up. Franz could really play. He can really, really play. And if him and Banchero can figure out how to make that thing work, I would say that they should be fighting for a play-in spot. I don't want to get too crazy and talk about they're going to be at 6 seed or 5. No. Play-in spot is right around where they are until they can keep developing this roster and getting more guys on the level of Banchero and Franz and some of these other guys.
I agree with you. Last year, I bet Orlando a lot, and I love their group too. As you mentioned, Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, and you make the comment about Markel Fultz. Obviously, really a disastrous number one pick coming out of Philly, but he's found his flow here, and I think he's found comfortability. I think he's detailed some mental health sketchiness over the years where maybe he was not really prepared to be the number one overall pick. Obviously, coming all the way across country from Washington to Philadelphia. And, we talked about this before with Madison Square Garden, TD Garden, Boston, Philly. Well, this is just what it is in that area. It's intense expectations. He did not function well. He had a bunch of injuries, but I always speculated that it was more so he was just uncomfortable in that city. Again, it's just my take, but I thought it was more mental than physical with him. I like this group. I really do. And as Junior said, I think we think they're going to compete for the play-in. Last year, they did finish 34-48. However, they did lose their last 4 bowl games. So at one point last year, they did have it at 34-44, which for that team last year was highly, highly respectable. Only 10 games under 500. But the win total here is not telling me a huge story. 34 last year, we're looking at 37.5. It's slight upward movement. It's very similar to Indiana. I just thought Indiana had more agreeability because Indiana really did show that cluster and then that cliff dive to come back up. I feel like Orlando has been a little more sustained on this average now in the back end of the season. A couple comments just jumping off of what Junior said regarding Miami and Atlanta. I think Atlanta is going to do the same thing that they always do. They're going to play lackadaisical ball in certain environments, and then they're going to turn up in their home gym when they need games. And they're going to play a lot better after Christmas.
Yes, sorry, I didn't say anything about Atlanta because I blanked on the third team while I was talking, so I'll go super quick. I think Okongwu, who's going into a contract year, if he's going to have to take that step up if the team's going to want to take a step up. I'm not really sure what I think about Trae Young because he there was some regression there last year, but I think that Quinn Snyder is the type of coach who can most likely get the best out of him. But I'm gonna give, I guess, my first hot take. I hate hot takes, but I'll just give one. If Trae this year looks like Trae last year, at what point do they start thinking about moving on from him? Because and this is a tricky one, right? So I spent a lot of time in Atlanta. I used to go to a lot of Atlanta Hawks games right around pandemic time, pre-pandemic time. The city really loves Trae. He's important, and you know how it is in certain cities. Certain athletes, and certain like Damon in Portland, for example, it's harder to trade certain people from certain spots. And I think that the city of Atlanta would get really upset if they traded Trae Young because they love him. It's not a stereotypical sports town like Philly or Boston or New York where wins and losses matter more. Not to say that people in Atlanta don't care about wins and losses, but if you know Atlanta, like half the people in Atlanta ain't even from Atlanta. So it's just a whole different vibe over there. And I think that the front office is going to have some serious decision making to do. And I'll end by saying this and kick it back over to you since I interrupted you. At some point, they're going to have to get a return on investment on Hunter because he's not for what they're paying him. His production is not up to par, and he's going to have to get better if they're going to get better. I think Trae Young gets way too much of the credit and way too much of the blame. Some of these other guys around him are going to have to do something.
I completely agree, and you made some very good points there. Quinn Snyder, in my opinion, is an above-average NBA coach. Of course, he's not a championship-winning coach, and I think that actually is kind of where this team is. And I don't know if they're going to get over that hump, but I think that's where you make the point about Trae Young. Is he a championship-winning player? And that's where you would move on from the guy. And that's where Atlanta would be annoyed by it, disheartened, whatever you want to call it. But they like the guy. It's more of an energy, as you said. It's not always wins and losses. It's what is he doing for us? What kind of charisma does he bring to the gym? You know, Friday night home games, is he going to turn up and entertain us? And he has, without question. I mean, he shoots the three ball lights out. He's obviously shooting 35, 40-footers on occasion. But again, is that winning titles? Probably not. I think to a certain degree, his body is not made for the deep playoffs. He is a very, very frail body. He wouldn't like me saying that, but it's just a fact. He's not a big guy. And guys like Stephen Curry have worked over the years to really bulk up and really be able to take that physicality. And I do use Stephen Curry as the reference point because, of course, Trae Young does play a very similar style of game. I think this team is pretty capped. I don't mind moving on from John Collins. I think John Collins did not really get along with Trae Young. I think that was a personality clash. And you mentioned DeAndre Hunter. I think DeAndre Hunter doesn't really get along with him either. I just look at the mentality. I look at a guy from UVA, very cerebral type, and Trae Young, kind of flashy, shooting the three. Doesn't really mess with DeAndre Hunter. More of like you said Dwayne Casey style of basketball.
Yeah, he's a defensive, tough. Them Virginia. You know the guys from that program, man. They're just sorry. You keep going, but yeah, I totally agree with you.
Without question. I mean, Tony Bennett up there runs a program. I mean, I swear they score 50 points. You're impressed. It's ridiculous, but. Nonetheless, we don't really love the Hawks. The books don't love the Hawks. The books are grading them right around 500 again. And as I mentioned, you're going to make money by betting the Hawks, but it's going to be very situational. They're going to play big home ball occasionally against big opponents, and those are their spots. Touching briefly on the Wizards, Wizards are graded to have a huge, huge cliff dive this year. They're going to be playing very loose ball. There's going to be no defense on that court. You're going to make money betting overs with the Wizards. I think that those are probably the only time you'll see me betting the Wizards in this campaign. And the Hornets are in disarray. The number's at 30.5. Our guy Noobs was talking about it in the chat. He was trying to figure out why the number was 30.5. I don't think anybody has a read on this group. I think there's just turmoil across the roster. I don't think the roster is constructed particularly well. A lot of guards, not really a lot of leadership. And Steve Clifford is really, in my opinion, one of the worst NBA coaches in the league. He's just a continuous stopgap. Junior, any comments on this one?
Yeah, Clifford's right up there with a Hornets coach as a guy who is just a plug-in until you can find the guy you actually want. In terms of listen, for me, the Wizards, there is a world where they're the worst team in the whole league. And there's a couple of reasons I say that. Number one, if Kyle Kuzma is your best player, you're basically a team in transition without an identity, right? Because he's not your best player on purpose. He's your best player as a matter of circumstance, right? So they find themselves in the circumstance where right now he's their best player. And it seems like I'm disrespecting Kyle Kuzma, but the reality is when you signed him, you never signed him with the intention of making him your best player. So whatever happens to the team, that's not his fault. You have to surround him with better players and make him what he is, which is like a number three option, right? Which is the best case scenario. Because even if he's your number two player, you're still not a championship team. You're just not terrible, right? So I know probably people are waiting for me to get to the elephant in the room, which is Jordan Poole. I don't know how that's going to go, right? Because Jordan Poole, to me, even as a member of the most cerebral, probably well-oiled machine in the league, showed me flashes of ridiculousness, right? And when I say ridiculousness, I mean this. If you're going to take Steph Curry like shots, you got to shoot with Steph Curry like efficiency. Because the reality is the only difference between Steph Curry and the average player is his. Or let me say it in a different way. Steph Curry is the best bad shot maker of all time. If you actually go back and look at the shots that he takes over the course of the season, and I suggest anyone listening to this that has NBA League Pass do it. I do this all the time. In League Pass, I'll go to players and just click field goal attempts, and it just gives you a running video of every single field goal they've taken all season. Go watch Steph Curry's field goal attempts and tell me he doesn't take at least 2 to 3. What the fuck are you thinking shots every single game? Well, Jordan Poole is doing this with significantly less talent. So if you get the worst version of Jordan Poole coupled with a below par Kyle Kuzma season, Jesus, like they could be an 18 to 20 win team like Detroit was last year. People are going to start getting shipped out left and right. I don't see an identity. I don't see a leader. I don't see a good front office. I don't see anything that would make me think anything other than taking the under with this team because they don't have a direction. There's nothing that you can lay your hat on with this team, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're right. And the Wizards are the best under number on the entire board. They won 35 games last year, and they're graded at 24.5. So what we were saying about Detroit coming up 10, they're downgraded 10. And if you guys want to take an under, personally, I don't like taking unders. It's just maybe it's a flaw in my tactics, but I just don't like it. But this is the best under on the entire board. There's no way around it. And just one final point. We're not going to spend too much time on the Wizards, but Junior said it. In my opinion, Jordan Poole was the worst player on the court last year in the playoffs for the Warriors. The worst player. So unregulated, chucking horrible shots, no defense. He literally looked like a G League player. I mean, it was that bad. So I don't know if you have any more comments on this one, Junior, but we can move to the Western Conference whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I just think that the fact that Jordan Poole is probably if you ask me like what's Jordan Poole's mindset coming into the season, it's most likely show Golden State that they made a mistake. I don't know that that's best for the Wizards and where they want to go. You understand what I'm saying? Like, because no matter what, you got to fit your game to the circumstances. Damian Lillard ain't going to go to Milwaukee and play like how he did in Portland. He's going to go there and adjust his game to the circumstances. I don't think Jordan Poole is capable of that personally.
I agree, and I've always thought that Jordan Poole is immature. Draymond Green punched him in practice last year, and of course everybody said, wow, Draymond, what are you doing? But you have to look at the other side of that. What the heck was Jordan Poole doing to incite that? I think he's very, very immature. I think he talks trash. I think he talks kind of stupid trash, like stuff you'd hear in
Bro, it was probably like he's a Michigan guy, Draymond's a Michigan State guy. It was probably like some Michigan State nonsense. It's probably something that dumb, but he took it too far. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I just see the way he would act on the court, like just the way he celebrates hitting threes. He has a very immature aspect to his personality, and I don't think it translates well to a locker room, particularly a locker room with the Warriors, who obviously their entire core is over 30 years old and they've won numerous titles. It was just the wrong environment for him. He will score the ball with Washington. As we mentioned, we do like overs with Washington this regular season. There's going to be a lot of points in those games. Taking a breath, 46 minutes in here. Let's talk some Western Conference ball. Northwest, defending champs, the Nuggets. Hell of a campaign last year. First title in franchise history. Highly impressive stuff all around. Well coached. Roster is deep. Roster is well balanced. There's nothing you dislike about Denver. Denver's going to hover right where they were last year, somewhere in the low to mid 50s as their win total. I think the more intriguing conversation within this particular division is the Oklahoma City Thunder, who obviously went far above expectations last year to actually make the play-in tournament. And I believe they won a play-in game, crazily enough. Did finish the campaign last year 40-42. Junior, I'll throw it to you for some comments on the Thunder here.
Our boy Chet, and which is why I'm very, very, very close to getting into the business of taking them over. I think he's a game changer. I think that he is something that the rest of the league is not going to be able to quantify. I think, and here's the thing with Chet. His defense, I think, is going to raise the ceiling of this team. If he can just stay healthy, he has the ability to be a special defender for a number of reasons: his size, his length, his intelligence. When I used to watch him in college, I was like, this guy doesn't just defend because he's bigger and more athletic than everyone else. He's actually just a good defender who actually puts in the work and gives us effort. Listen, if you were betting against Oklahoma City last year, you're getting your feelings hurt a lot. So I think the market is going to adjust big time to them this year, but I think that the league is still going to have a hard time figuring out. Listen, I watch almost all of their games, and I still have a hard time figuring out exactly how they do what they do. But we've already mentioned this a couple times, and we're going to mention it again. You ain't questioning their effort. The effort's there. They got a bunch of guys who are trying to earn NBA security, get themselves long-term deals. So you're never, ever going to get less than 100% effort. Even Lou Dort, who already got paid, Shark, we've already mentioned this. I actually know Lou Dort personally. The last playoff game that I coached, his team beat my team. So I've been watching Lou Dort since he was like a 14-year-old kid. And Lou Dort, I'm 6'2", 240. Lou Dort was almost bigger than me when he was like 15 years old. And the one thing that got him to where he is he can't shoot worth a lick, is his effort. He's a tough-minded, strong kid who's going to put a maximum effort. There's not one guy on that roster you can look at and be like, I'm not really too sure if this guy's going to bring it. They're all going to bring it. They got length. They got decent athleticism, which and their ability to play team defense is going to be brought up by Chet. Chet can actually stretch the floor on the opposite end because last time we saw him play basketball, he could shoot threes. I doubt that that's gotten worse. I love everything about him. I'm very close to pulling the trigger on them on an over. They have 22 first-round picks over the next couple of years. This team is trending up, and you got to get on the wagon sooner rather than later because, like I said, the markets are going to adjust quickly.
I completely agree, and I think this is very similar to what we said about the Pacers, continuing noticeable momentum with a young group from last year. And the line is telling you the same story. This team did finish 2 games under 500 last year. They're graded at 44.5. I'm not on this officially. I do think it could be sharp at 44.5, but I do think the over is really spot on to what Junior was saying. And one thing that I'll jump off of, I really like this coach, Mark Daigneault. I think if you look at his pedigree, guy was a graduate assistant or an undergraduate assistant, one of the two at UConn, actually, under Jim Calhoun for 4 years before working with Billy Donovan at the University of Florida and Billy Donovan with the Thunder. And I think that's interesting that this guy's entire career arc has been under Calhoun and Donovan, college and pro. He's been basically just mentored at the highest level. I think he's a very above average coach, not a fiery guy, but I don't think he needs to be fiery. We said this about the Celtics. They could use a fiery coach to jolt up a group that may lack energy. This Oklahoma City team, as Junior mentioned, does not lack energy. This is a really young roster, really competitive roster, young pros, got a lot of length, willing to body you up as well, a couple of these guys. We love this team. And just as a cross-referencing point within this division, They were 2 games under 500 last year, moved up to 44.5. The Timberwolves were 2 games over 500 last year, 42-40. They're only moved up to the same number, 44.5. So just as a relationship between those two teams within this division, books are expecting more momentum upward from Oklahoma City. And of course, the bottom 2 teams in this division don't require a lot of conversation. 37-45 Utah Jazz last year were the darlings of early season ATS. They covered, I believe, 90% of their games coming out the gate for about 10 to 12 ball games. Obviously did crater down to finish 8 games under 500. Portland, not much to discuss here. Gutted roster, Scoot Henderson in there. It's going to be the youngest group in the league. They're really plummeting. We said that the under for the Wizards was obviously a very advantageous take. Don't love taking unders. I'll say it again, but I do think the under is probably the right side for Portland. Junior, any comments on these 2 bottom feeders?
Oh, sorry about that. I was on mute there. I was just saying I can't stand this roster. I hated it last year with Lillard. I hate it without Lillard. I understand why they did what they did. Obviously, their hand was forced. They're kind of in the situation where I can't judge them yet. They're just in who's good enough to be around right now, or sorry, who's good enough to be around for the next couple of years while we move all of the other pieces and get some kind of identity here. So they're kind of a team in limbo. Making a bet on them. What exactly are you betting on? I'm not 100% sure Chauncey Billups is a good NBA coach. I have no idea. So whenever I'm looking at a situation and I have more questions than answers, I just stay the hell away from it. And I got to admit something, Sharky. I don't think I made a bet with a game that involved the Blazers all of last season. That's how much I stay away from this team, because when I look at you and I can't make any kind of projection where I feel confident about, then what am I betting on? So I just stay clear of this team. They're like the Tennessee Titans for me in the NFL. That team ain't getting my money under any circumstances, and I feel the same way about Portland.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, and I like what you said about Chauncey Billups, and I think Chauncey Billups is an interesting conversation. Obviously, won a title in the league, was noted as one of the best clutch shooters in his generation, but I don't think he's a great coach. And I will say this: I think he was a good leader on court during his career within his peer group and his generation. I think he's a little bit impatient with young players. And I actually think if Chauncey Billups was going to excel as a head coach, he would excel with an older roster, even though he's not an older guy. That's just his mentality. And I think he's the wrong coach for this group. I think he was obviously brought in for the Lillard group, which did not work out. But at this point, I think he's probably in his last year with this franchise, and they'll move on from him. And as Junior mentioned, the Portland Trail Blazers to bet are incredibly difficult to handicap on the number. It's just all over the place. Let's move to the Southwest. I'm dropping an official play within this division. We are on the Mavericks over 43.5 win total, 1 unit official. And you look at the Mavs last year. I mean, this is a great buy on the over. This team is incredibly talented. They have 2 of the best guards in the league. They have one of the best young guards under 25 in league history. And they really just didn't figure it out last year. Early season, the roster was not working together, and they were really lackluster. Luka was handling the ball far, far too much, even given his skill set and quality. After the Kyrie Irving trade, they couldn't figure it out, and they really cratered down. And I think to the shock of many, including myself, they didn't even make the play-in tournament. This is a team that went to the Western Conference Finals the year before. Talk about just an absolute cliff dive. But this is where this becomes a great buy spot. You go to the Western Conference Finals, then you miss the playoffs. Talk about 0 or 100. The books are moving this back up. They're telling you an offseason, a conversation, an integration of a player like Kyrie Irving takes time, and this is where they will improve. And this is a really strong number, obviously winning only 38 last year, graded at 43.5. Really like the Mavericks to show upward movement this year. Junior, any comments?
So Same question I have about Chauncey, I have about Jason Kidd, but to a lesser extent, just because Jason Kidd has way more coaching experience. Jason Kidd, well, I'll refrain from going too far, but I think he is actually the most important dynamic on their team. Because making Luca and or getting Kyrie and Luca to fit in with each other, that's his responsibility, right? He's got to figure out a way to make that happen. So let me just be. I want to be consistent with my analysis, so I'm going to say something about Luca. Uh, James Harden and Russell Westbrook. I I love to hang my hat on the fact that I predicted their downfall as individual players years before it actually happened. Like when Russell Westbrook won MVP, me and some of my closest friends, in terms of the guys who I talk basketball with, almost like lost respect for me because he won MVP, and I was like, yeah, this is egregious. Like if you watch those games, this style of play is just not conducive to winning, and we're here to win games. We're not here to win individual awards. You ain't a tennis player. You're not a golfer. You're a basketball player, which means you got teammates. So I say all of that to say Luka's usage rating of 37.6% last year, that's not conducive to winning basketball. You ain't winning a title where one guy has the ball more than a third of the time that he's on the floor. It's insanity. That's just a lack of contribution from other players. It's over reliance on him. His makeup as a player, why are you even putting that much stress on his body? Until 12 months ago, Luka had a legitimate dad bod. So he's a guy who's not even regularly in shape, and you have him, you're basically driving him into the ground. Now, mind you, Luka loves it. It's not like Luka is just doing this against Luka's will. This is probably how Luka prefers to play. But at the exact same time, like, there has to be a return on investment in terms of if you're going to dominate the ball that much, right? And we're not competing for championships, that's the coach's fault. That's why I circle it back to Jason Kidd. He's going to have to figure out a way to make this team win other than being like, hey, Luka, you just figure it out. Well, no. Actually, you figure it out, Jason Kidd. That's what you get paid to do. Luka does his job. So I might sound like I'm blaming Luka, but I'm not. And just to expand on this point, LeBron James' entire career has been one of the most ball-dominant players in the league, right? Well, LeBron James has never had a usage rating over 33. His career usage rating is 31, and every season it's somewhere between 29 and 31, 32. It's always consistently at that same number. Luka at 37, you're talking about like higher than Michael Jordan, higher than Westbrook at this prime, higher than Hard. Like it's too much. It's too much of one guy. So how are you expecting Kyrie to fit in with a guy who's that ball dominant? Kyrie played with LeBron, who's less ball dominant than Luka. You got to really think about that, right? So with an off season under their belt for Kyrie to kind of figure out, okay, Luka likes to do this, so in turn I'm going to do that. I just expect that to work out better. I expect them to actually be a top 4 seed, which a lot of people probably don't. Because I think with those two guys on a nightly basis locked in, you can compete with anybody. And I think that their peripheral players or their role players, they don't have a situation where they got guys trying to shine like how Christian Wood had that issue where, not to say Christian Wood played badly, but I feel like he wasn't starting all the time because he would come in and try to do things they didn't want him to do. They don't really have anybody like that. Everyone knows their role. Everyone's going to play within themselves. They brought Seth Curry back for additional shooting to add with Tim Hardaway Jr. I actually think the Mavs will end up as the 4th, 5th seed in the West, especially after not making the playoffs last year.
Completely agree. This is a great over at 43.5. And Junior makes a great point about the coach. And I had taken some notes, and I was looking at this division significantly because I felt like this division had a little more access than the other divisions. And one of the things that I had written down was there is a significant coaching advantage in this division to Taylor Jenkins, Ime Udoka, Greg Popovich, and Willie Green. And I said, Jason Kidd by far is the worst motivator and psychological manager in the division, which could hold them back with Luka, Kyrie, and the complexity of that dynamic. Junior is absolutely spot on. This is very much in the coach's hands. This has the ability to go up to 50-plus wins or it has the ability to crater down. The talent is there. They moved on from some guys that were lacking physicality, like Christian Wood. They have more physicality now in this group. This is a bye team, but Jason Kidd, some of the comments we were hearing last year from Jason Kidd in the press conference, I remember there was one spot they played back-to-back games in Portland, and they got just absolutely hammered in Portland. And he was basically just like, we didn't even want to be there. And this is the coach saying that. You can't be having that from the coach, Junior.
I heard that, so I'm glad you heard it too. And I was like, you see what I'm saying, bro? Because even a more seasoned coach would just be like, that's not something you should say out loud. Like, come on, man.
No, without question. When I heard that, that was the first telltale sign for me that this coach is just, I hate to use the word incompetent, but certainly not really where he needs to be from a mental standpoint himself. Lock it in, Jason Kidd. We need an over this in this spot. Staying in this division very briefly, I do see some interesting dynamics developing with Memphis. Obviously, Memphis getting Marcus Smart, Ja Morant suspended for 25 games. I like this trade for Memphis. I think Marcus Smart is a more mature, more experienced version of Dylan Brooks. Of course, not the same body type, slightly different game on court, but this guy is a leader. He will bring a competitive fire to this group, and I think he will bring more focus and cultivate more respect, having been in the finals before, which is, of course, exactly where Memphis wants to go. They are slightly downgraded from their final result last year. Memphis did pretty much clean up this division last year. They did win the final tally by 9 games. They were 20 over 500, 51 and 31. They are being downgraded. I think part of that is purely the fact that Ja won't play for the first 25 games. But, Junior, I'm sure you remember this. In previous seasons when Ja Morant did not play, they actually played great ball together. Triple J, Tyus Jones, these guys just run and gun. Desmond Bane just shoots the 3 ball. I think that the over, I'm not on this officially. I do have another official in this division, which we will get to shortly. I think this is downgraded for them from 51 to 45, but I think it still could be an over because I think books are just subtracting Ja from a weighting perspective and not giving enough credential to how well this team plays without him. Junior, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so they were like 33 and 17 without him in the last 2 years, I'm pretty sure. So, which is an amazing record. It got some people to lose their minds and say, "Oh, they're better without him." Because remember, he came back and they were kind of struggling a little bit. But it's like, guys, playoffs, right? In the playoffs, you need Ja. Come on, don't be crazy. So, I'm actually a little bit afraid to touch them for one very specific reason, which some people are going to think that I'm overreacting to this. I think Tyus Jones is a big loss for them. Tyus Jones was balling out of his mind last season. And balling out of his mind, right? He averaged 10 points and 5 assists, but you got to put that into context. Doesn't really play that many minutes. And what I saw from him is a guy who's a competent shot maker who always looked to make his teammates better in every situation. He definitely raised the level of their second unit. Their second unit without Tyus Jones is trash. I'm telling you that right now. It's absolute trash. So I think now you have no Ja and no Tyus Jones. So we're asking who? Marcus Smart to be the lead one. Well, Marcus Smart has already shown us he's not that. I'm not trying to disrespect Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart is a player who he's outside of the mold. He's a one of one. There's nobody else in the league that's like Marcus Smart. Just think about it. Who would you even compare Marcus Smart to? Nobody, because there's nobody that's really like him. There's no other 6'4" guys that can guard guys that are 6'10", right? But at the exact same time, he's clearly not a traditional point guard. He's really not much of a shooting guard. He's just a basketball player, right? So now you're asking Marcus Smart to be the lead guard. I don't really know how that works itself out. I think Marcus Smart's role for this team is come playoff time. I think Marcus Smart's role for this team is when Ja is not around, keeping everyone focused, keeping everyone ready to play, making sure the intensity is there, making sure you lead by example with your defensive effort, which is always there, right? So he's going to bring them things that are not exactly quantifiable, if that even makes sense what I'm saying. Whereas what Tyus Jones did for them was very quantifiable. I think people underestimate how hard it is to average 10 points and 5 assists on limited minutes. It's just not easy. and he was very efficient for them. So I think they're going to feel his loss. And I'm just going to end by saying this. The thing that makes me less enthusiastic about Memphis is twofold. Number one, I believe for them to get to where they need to go, Jaren Jackson Jr. needs to take that next step. And I watched the FIBA World Championships. You know what Steve Kerr didn't like doing? Playing Jaren Jackson Jr. in important moments at all, like ever. And they needed him to step up, right? So it, their ideal lineup is him as the five. How's that going to work? Him and Adams together. How's that going to work? Is Desmond Bain going to continue to make that leap, right? Because I think that, and I think I'm pretty sure Sharky will agree with me. I think people believe that real life sports is kind of like Madden or NBA 2K, where progression is just a straight line that keeps going up. That's not how sports works at all. Desmond Bain can plateau. He could get worse. You kind of don't know how that's going to go until you see it, right? So, um, again, I guess I'll get back to the thing I just said before. Whenever I got more questions than answers, it's a wait and see for me.
No, I completely agree with you because I don't like the fact that they're being downgraded from 51 to 45 and a half. One of the things I always say is that the books know things that we don't know numerically, and they put it into their algorithm. They spit out that number. So they're telling you a downward point is coming. But we're buying another unit in this division officially, and we're not buying an under. We're buying an over. Houston Rockets over 31 and a half, minus 120, 1 unit official. This is great stuff. This is absolutely great stuff. You see the Houston Rockets here, which last year they finished with the worst record in the conference at 22 and 60. Actually tied the exact same record with the Spurs, both in this division. But when you see 22 wins and they come back at 31 and a half, it's telling you a very unique story. And it's telling you a deep story. Number one, Ime Udoka, head coach. This is a guy that went to the finals a couple years ago. This guy made some transgressions, which were not even illegal. He just hung out with some women, and he basically got fired because of it. And we'll save that conversation for a different day. But this guy is a great NBA coach. He's a great motivator. He comes from the pop tree. He's a beautiful combination of a disciplinarian and an authoritarian voice, but also adjustable and also very motivational when he needs to be. And he will get in the minds of this group. And secondarily, the roster moves that this team made, I like these roster moves. Notably, this team is young around Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun, both 21 years old. But one of the best things you can do for young players like that who have all-star game expectations in their career in coming years, bring in veteran players. So number one, you bring in Dylan Brooks. Dylan Brooks clearly ostracized himself with Memphis. They no longer want him there. Fine. But this guy has been in the playoffs. He's been deep in the playoffs. He's a hell of a competitor. He's a dirty player, no doubt. But you know what? Sometimes a young group, they need a guy who's going to ruffle the feathers a little bit, teach them how to really compete at a high level. And I think one of the knocks on Jalen Green early in his career, he's just soft. Guy's a great offensive player, doesn't play a whole lot of defense. Dylan Brooks is great from that angle. You bring in Freddie Van Vliet. Freddie Van Vliet will bring he will be the orchestrator of this team. They did not have last year, and he will really rein the group in. And I think a couple other guys, which I like, will be just mentors, which is very important for a young group. Number one, Jeff Green, 15-year veteran, good voice in the locker room, will not play a ton, but again, a mentor. Guy like Victor Oladipo has gone through hell in his career with injuries. He will expect some on-court quality. He will also be a good mentor. I think he's a very intelligent player, obviously in his 10th campaign out of Indiana. And as I mentioned, Dylan Brooks and Freddie Van Vliet. And one final guy, Reggie Bullock, 10-year veteran from North Carolina. So you're getting all in one offseason, Jeff Green, Freddie Van Vliet, and Victor Oladipo. It's going to be an older team. It's going to be a team that is much more integrated, well coached. I think this team gets to 35 victories this year to the surprise of many. Junior, any comments on this one?
I think that they are going to go over their win total. I think that they have adults on their team now, which they haven't had for a couple of years. You have to have adults in the room, or else nobody cares about winning. Um, I respect Jalen Green's game. I think he's uber talented. He's actually a lot of fun to watch. But because I watch a lot of Jalen Green, he is extremely frustrating. He's not a point guard. So, in that sense, hopefully, now that Van Vliet's in town, we're seeing less of Jalen Green handling the ball and more of Jalen Green doing what he does best, and that's finishing and just being explosive. I think that one of the benefits of having adults in the room is a guy who, like Chengun, who was clearly their most efficient player. He might not be their best player, but he's their most efficient player. Chengun is seventh on that team in shots per 36. That is literal criminal activity. That's insanely egregious. That Jabari Smith, for example, was getting more shots than Chengun last season. So I think that Udoka is just going to come in and fix those little things like that. That like, you think Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, the guy who beat up his girlfriend, who I'm not even going to say his name. You think all of those guys didn't know that Chengun should be touching the ball more? Of course they know that. They just don't give a shit because winning was not the priority. Shining was the priority. Having fun was the priority. Getting some highlights was the priority. Collecting your check was a priority. Winning has never been the priority until now. Because make no mistake, if the Celtics could do it over again, they'd still have Udoka in the building. They would probably be a championship team last year or going into this year with Udoka in the building. Adults in the room now, veterans on the team. This team is going to go over that win total. I definitely like that. I'm going to get involved in that bet.
Without question. Just finishing up on this division, the only team we haven't discussed, New Orleans Pelicans, graded very, very similarly to the Timberwolves. As I mentioned, 3 teams last year finished right around each other in this conference. It was New Orleans, it was Minnesota, and it was Oklahoma City. All 3 are graded at 44.5 this year. But again, when you do some just small window numerical analysis, Timberwolves 42-40, 44.5. Pelicans 42-40, 44.5. Thunder 40-42, 44.5. I think that New Orleans and Minnesota are capped numerically at that number, where I think that Oklahoma City at that number is uncapped. So if you guys are betting these 3 teams, buy the over on Oklahoma City. I think New Orleans and Minnesota are going to be really sharp on the number. And, of course, a lot of moving parts. Zion coming back, I think, finally will maybe play a full season. I don't know. Junior, what do you have on the Pelicans in terms of Zion in this situation?
Yeah, I think we're asking too much to expect Zion to be a full-time basketball player. And I say that because there are a lot of all-star level players that we accept as not full-time players. Just one second. Sorry, a lot of yelling going on behind me. What I was saying was, like, look at Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler has played over 60 games, like, once in the last, like, 7, 8 years, if I'm not mistaken. I'm kind of just pulling that number off the top of my head. Nobody really gives him a hard time about that. Now, there's an obvious reason for that. If Zion can play 60-ish games a year, right, between 60 and 65, and then do his thing in the playoffs, people will just accept that this is who he is. They've accepted that this is who Anthony Davis is for a decade. They've accepted this is who Jimmy Butler is. And there's a bunch of other guys that I could name that we just accept that they've been. Steph Curry misses a bunch of games every year. So stars missing games is not new. Now, if you're going to miss the whole goddamn season, well, then, yeah. And and on top of that, you're going to be overweight. And then on top of that, you're going to have off-the-court scandals. And, yes, people's patience is going to wear thin. But I think that we kind of have to change our expectations of who Zion's going to be. He's never going to be a full-time basketball player, not at that size, that weight, the torque that he puts on his knees. Like, it's crazy, right? I think C.J. McCollum, why is C.J. McCollum not getting more grief for how garbage he was last year? Because I love C.J. McCollum. I think he's a fantastic basketball player, an example to young kids that it don't matter where you go to school or where you get drafted. If you got game, you're going to get an opportunity. But damn, he was shit last year, like really bad. Now, everyone can have a down year, and he's been pretty consistent, so I looked for him to bounce back. But if you get the C.J. McCollum you got last year, then the ceiling on this team is capped. I think if you get an average to good C.J. McCollum, they should be a playoff team. And again, in the Western Conference, that's easier said than done because it's going to be a bloodbath. But the continuity, the coach who you mentioned, who clearly showed that he's a leader of men. He got all of those guys who Stan Van Gundy had the exact same roster to buy in and win games because he is a true leader of men. Because I doubt he's a better excellence than those guys than Stan Van Gundy. He's probably at a similar level or maybe a little bit worse, but as a leader, as someone who could get you to play your best and maximize your ability, he's shown us he can do that. I think they can be okay.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love the coach. I love the group. I think, as you mentioned, CJ bounce back campaign, maybe getting a little more comfortable here. Obviously, only his third season coming over from Portland. But I think the final point on this is just Zion, in my opinion, and I think Junior does not disagree. He's got to lose some weight, and it's not a bad thing. And I don't think he would lose his bounce if he lost a little weight. I mean, this is totally off the record of basketball, but the first thing that came to mind when I thought about this is how Tiger Woods reinvented his swing about 4 times in his career. You can reinvent yourself as an athlete and become a better version of yourself in a different career window. I just think Zion got away with this in high school and college. He didn't have to get up and down as much. He probably didn't have to defend as much. Obviously, the season is significantly shorter. I just can't believe they don't have somebody in the coaching staff or the front office that's able to actually have a logical conversation with this guy and say, listen, we're not offending you. We're not taking away your game, but let's work to have a little more pliability. Let's drop 20 pounds and you will play better ball.
I mean, you should just go talk to Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley coming into the NBA was known as the round mound of rebound. He lost some weight and became a league MVP.
Yeah.
The math is pretty fucking simple, man.
Yeah. And again, we just don't know what goes on with these guys off the court. Of course, Zion Williamson had this scandal with a couple porn stars, and they were going back and forth on social media. And you just don't know what really goes on with these guys.
Hey, listen, I'm not going to hold it against Zion that he's a simp. I mean, a lot of people are simps. It just is what it is. I care about his basketball. But even that situation shows you the lack of maturity. Yeah. Because even when the porn star started saying what she said, have you not learned from LeBron James? You know what LeBron James doesn't ever do? Entertain foolishness. People can say the wildest shit about LeBron. He just doesn't even answer. He literally doesn't even address it. So when she started saying what she said, just don't say nothing and it just goes away. But he doesn't even do that right. So just to piggyback off what you said, his weight issues, his off-the-court issues kind of speak to a lack of a proper inner circle.
Yeah, without question. And I think the inner circle comment is spot on because I don't think that Zion has bad intentions. He's not a bad dude. I think he's actually a good dude. I actually like him as a person. I think he's just a real solid guy, but he has the wrong people advising him, and he's just making the wrong decisions. And those are our final comments on the Southwest. Now let's move to the Pacific. The Pacific is a really interesting conversation. Pacific is very similar to the Atlantic from the standpoint that every team finished above 500 last year. It was the deepest division by a mile, the most competitive, and there's a lot of mobility we're expecting in this division going forward this season. I think the first thing that really stood out to me when I looked at the Pacific, Sacramento Kings won the division last year, and they're projected to finish last in the division this season. And again, when all the teams are only 5 games separated, it doesn't mean that Sacramento is going to fall off that much. What it means is the other teams are going to improve, notably the Warriors and the Lakers. And I say notably because I think most people would say Phoenix, Durant season 1 full, Beal. No. Phoenix is so unbelievably guard heavy, basically no bigs other than Nurkic. Junior will make a comment on that when we talk Phoenix in full in about 5 minutes. But I really want to talk about the Lakers. We're buying 2 units on the Lakers. 1 unit to win the division at plus 350 and 1 unit to finish second in the division at plus 300. I think they finish first or second, and you will profit if you take both of those bets. And let me just talk about the Lakers from 2022. The 2022 Lakers finished the season 42-39. However, they started the season 2-10 and did finish 17-7. So this is that beautiful story of statistical upward movement continuing off the back end of the season. And I think this is far more than just statistics. This is some great personnel moves that were made at the trade deadline and some offseason moves. We just mentioned Phoenix does not have a lot of size. The Lakers have a ton of young size. Rui Hachimura, they signed Jackson Hayes, Torian Prince, Cam Reddish, a sneaky 6'8", Jared Vanderbilt, Christian Wood, and they also did sign Gabe Vincent in the offseason. Since the beginning of last year, this team acquired Rui Hachimura, Jackson Hayes, Torian Prince, Cam Reddish, D'Angelo Russell, Jared Vanderbilt, Gabe Vincent, and Christian Wood. You pair that with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, who is making comments that I've never made him hear, that I've never heard from this guy before, talking a little trash on the Nuggets in the offseason. This is a new day for Anthony Davis. 30 years old. He's finding maturity. He will be jacked the hell up. Junior, any comments?
Yeah, I mean, listen. Sorry, where's the hell's my mic? Can you hear me? You good?
Yeah.
Okay. The window for LeBron. I mean, obviously, we've been saying it's closing for years, and it doesn't seem to be closing. But for those of us who are basketball junkies who pay attention to everything, you could see in the playoffs at various points, and even during the regular season, but really playoffs, he just had no gas in the tank. Right? So Anthony Davis, I think, is taking on this role of puffing out his chest a little bit in the sense that he has to take on that role, right? So we've been saying since the bubble title that if Anthony Davis can be the one and LeBron can be the two, this is a championship team. I think that Anthony Davis has finally come to the harsh reality or the realization, probably with LeBron James's help, that is their only path to a championship. Because if LeBron has to be the one again, you're not winning a title. You're asking too much of him. It's actually literally unfair to LeBron to even ask him to still be in this position at this point in his career. I think that Torian Prince is a sneaky signing for them because he can give you low-end starters minutes or high-end bench production. I think if Austin Reeves can continue his upward trajectory, which there's no evidence to say that he can, especially the way that he played in international play, which I always give guys a little extra credit for international play because you're being taken out of your element. And we've seen some guys, literally star players, crash and burn on the international level. So if you can get put into a different environment and still thrive, that means that you're just a basketball player. So because I was still kind of skeptical of Austin Reeves, I'm not gonna lie. It's probably because I feel like Lakers Nation, just like Cowboys Nation, just like a lot of Yankees Nation, they over-exaggerate how good certain players are. But Austin Reeves has really shown us that he can be the real deal. Hopefully, there's no dip in production now that he's gotten paid. But if he can continue this thing, and if my boy Rui, can you take that next step, Rui? You don't even got to take a big step. Just don't regress back to Washington, Rui. If we can get some version of playoff Rui, he doesn't have to excel every night. Give him 12 points a game on like 48% shooting and grab like 7 boards. If you can do that? Now the Lakers are in business because they only need the peripheral guys, the guys, and I'm not talking about D'Angelo. Whatever you get from D'Angelo's house money, right? But these other guys, if they can just be consistent around LeBron, around AD, this is a championship caliber team. As much as most Laker haters don't want to hear it, it's just a fact. If you have LeBron and you have Anthony Davis, then you are a championship contending team. Period. They showed us that last year, starting off 2-10 and ending up in the Western Conference Finals.
Completely agreed. And I mean, I have the hat on, but we could be seeing this finals this year, if we're being honest. And but just staying on the Lakers for a second, Junior mentioned it. Austin Reeves gets paid, but I don't think that's going to change anything. First of all, I think he has great people around him. We talked about Zion having the wrong people. Austin Reeves has the right people. I think he's here to stay. I think he's a very above-average basketball player. Staying on the acquisitions, just a couple words I wrote down that I think are important. They have 5 front court players under 30, tons of height. Hachimura, Hayes, Vanderbilt. Three categorical points. Notable grinder types. When you watch Jared Vanderbilt compete, the guy is an elite defender, on ball, pure energy, great footwork, and also incredibly long. Talk about Rui Hachimura. Hachimura in the offseason was noted for training with LeBron. I think he was the only guy that was training with LeBron. He was talking about how he was getting up early to bike, to get into deep physical condition. And Jackson Hayes, if you guys remember this guy coming out of Texas, played with the Pelicans for a couple of years. just a real fiery competitor. Good energy about him, happy guy, good soul, but also really competitive. These are the right type of players you want to put around them. And go to the acquisition of Gabe Vincent. Of course, I believe he played for UCSB in college. Just your Pat Riley special, finding these guys that are kind of off the grid and really putting them on the roster. But Gabe Vincent in the playoffs last year had a couple great interviews in the post game with Shaq and Barkley and those guys, and you could just sense that he was really about the process. He's really just a centered guy. He's a professional. Again, the exact type of guys you want on this franchise. And final point, Darvin Ham year 2. Last year it didn't start right. Coaches do get into their flow in their second season. You know, he saw the ball go through the hoop, if you want to call it that, late season, that what he does will connect with this group. This team is a bye group. It's a great division to buy teams who did finish. Lakers did finish last, they did finish way below their average last year. And I'm looking at it here. They did finish 43 and 39, but all boxes checked. We love this team. Upward movement in this division to win the division at plus 350 and second for plus 300. I want to talk about the Clippers very briefly. Clippers, in my opinion, are kind of old news at this point. And people like the Clippers. There's definitely a gambling Twitter faction that really loves the Clippers. I'm not entirely sure why. Recycled group, a lot of shooters. In my opinion, this team capped about a year and a half ago. A lot of moving parts. Junior, what's going on with the Clippers?
Yeah, the thing I like, because I don't like them either, but if I'm going to say that there's a thing that I do like about them is that they probably have the most underrated coach in the whole league. I don't think Tyronn Lue gets nearly enough respect for how he's able to not only keep this very average roster, in playoff contention when George and Kawhi are not there, but even his role in LeBron's championships. You know what I mean? Like, people don't talk about Lue like he's an elite coach. Maybe he's not elite. He's at least a top 10 coach. No team that he's coached has ever just been downright shit. And I like his intensity, and I like the fact that he kind of said to Kawhi, hey, listen, bro, you're going to have to play more. You're going to have to play more games. You're going to have to be more available. No coaches had the balls to come close to saying anything of the sort to Kawhi. When Pop did, Kawhi ran away and went to Toronto. So the fact that they've got a proper professional coach, they've got decent roster, guys on the roster. Norm Powell excelled over there and seems to have found a home. So here's my problem with them. I agree with you that they capped out a couple of years ago because outside of the people that I just named, I think, and again, I'm not going to comment on Russell Westbrook because it's very similar to D'Angelo Russell. It's house money there, right? If he plays well, amazing. If he doesn't play well, that shouldn't be enough to derail your season, especially at the amount of money you're paying him right now. So then I then look at the rest of their players in terms of young guys. Like, who's the next person that can take a step up? I don't see it. I think Terrence Mann is capped out. I think Terrence Mann is who he is. I don't think he's going to get better than that. And then that leads me to believe that, or it leads me to say this. Why do I believe that they're going to get better unless you can convince me that Kawhi and Paul George are going to both play 60-plus games, which probably not going to. So I think they're a regression candidate. I don't think that they're going to be better than Sacramento. I understand why people think Sacramento is going to regress because they had the second fewest wins of any division winner. But I think it ain't Sacramento's fault that the rest of their division underachieved. They did what they're supposed to do, right? So I think that the Clippers are probably going to finish last in the division, which is probably still good enough to get into the play-in somehow, or at least, a 7-8 seed or whatever the case are, 6, 7, 8 seed. And then once they're in the tournament, they can do damage if they've got their guys. The regular season, of all the teams in the league, we already know this is the team that the regular season means the least to. So that's kind of where I'm at with them.
Yeah, completely agreed. And I like what you said about Ty Lue, because I think Ty Lue oftentimes gets camped into this group of coaches that just profited off of LeBron James. And, Spoelstra is another one. Spoelstra is a great coach that did win titles with a young LeBron James, who has proven time and time again his high quality. I think Ty Lue's right there with it. So I completely agree with you on that. And as we mentioned, we just think that this team is capped out. It's very, very dependent on the three ball, and that can only take you so far. It's not going to win you titles ultimately, unless you're the Warriors of years past, who are the best 3-point shooting team probably in the history of the league. So don't love the Clippers, but as Junior mentioned, they could probably still get into the playoffs, even finishing last in this division. This is by far the most competitive division in the sport. And let's talk about the other two teams. Let's talk about Phoenix first. Obviously, Kevin Durant comes over late season last year, gets injured. A lot of moving parts there. Bradley Beal comes over. A couple other acquisitions, very, very guard heavy. I can't say I love this without really any bigs. I know you're not thrilled with it either, Junior.
No, I don't love it. I don't love it. I do think that, again, another one of these probably undervalued coaches. I think Frank Vogel's going to come in and at least give them some order, some direction, some make sure that they're prepared to win every night. Not to say that Monty Williams didn't do that, but I think it's just a different style of coach. A guy who, in his time working with LeBron and AD, learned to put his own ego aside, because the Frank Vogel that was in Indiana is not the Frank Vogel that was in LA. And I actually have a lot of respect for him for being able to adjust to his situation and making it work. You know what I mean? And I think that set him up for this stint in Phoenix, where he's got three massive egos, and he's going to have to figure out a system and just a way of getting these to coexist. Now, the reports that I'm seeing is that Bradley Beal is going to play point guard. I don't know how much I love that. And the reason I say that is this. I'm not saying that he's incapable of doing it. What I am saying is I've never seen it before. Whereas Devin Booker, I thought, did a good job of being a combo guard when Chris Paul would be out. I think Devin Booker's game actually went to another level the last time Chris Paul had an extended absence. And I'd like to see Devin Booker kind of continue in that role. You're not necessarily a point guard. You're more of like a Luka, LeBron type, James Harden type point guard, where you're not like a traditional point guard. You're just the lead ball handler that gets the team into their sets. Because I think Booker's game has matured enough that he's not going to be so ball dominant that it takes them out of their sets and what they're trying to do. I think that, if anything, it'll have Bradley Beal playing where he's supposed to be playing. Kevin Durant, he can adjust to any situation. He's already proven that throughout his career. I think having the ball in Booker's hands gives you the most competent playmaker you have making those decisions. So I'm a little hesitant with that. And again, Vogel's kind of still trying to figure it out. So maybe that's the early reports, but that's not how it's going to go down. But of course, the big elephant in the room is forgetting their big man's name from Portland right now for some reason. I'm having a brain fart.
Oh, Nurkic.
Nurkic's foot injuries have made him a peripheral player. He's not the Nurkic he was a couple of years ago. He's had some really bad foot injuries. He's always seemed to have weight problems. And he's another guy whose effort, I'm not 100% convinced by his effort when I watch him play basketball. So if that's the guy that's going to be your quote unquote big man, you're gonna miss some DeAndre Ayton. You're gonna regret some of the things you said about DeAndre Ayton. I think that this is what I'll say just to close it out with Phoenix. They have an owner who's shown that he is going to spend money. They're not done making roster moves. I don't know what that means, but this is not the final form of their team. They're going to bring on other guys. They're going to get big guys. They'll figure out something.
Yeah, they have to do something to bring, as you said, bigs and physicality. Just a couple of players that we didn't mention, but just all shooters. They got Grayson Allen on this team now. They got Eric Gordon on this team now. They have Nazir Little, Damian Lee, Josh Okogie, another 6'4" guard. They're just littered with short guards who shoot. And the only other guy on the roster that's particularly tall, Drew Eubanks and Bol Bol. Bol Bol's got some upside, but I mean, I don't know. Just not in love with it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think Kevin Durant is at a point in his career where he's going to play primarily at the 4. And he's going to be asked to do a lot for them defensively and rebounding-wise. I think it's going to be probably one of the best rebounding years of his career. But I think that we've seen a shift in his game where a shift in. I wish Jason Tatum would make this shift in this game. Kevin Durant spends a lot more time catching the ball at the high post and kind of working from there. Can someone fucking convince Jason Tatum to get his ass in the high post and stop taking so many fucking step back threes? That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I think Kevin Durant's going to slowly but surely be around the basket more. He's actually somehow an underrated defender, especially as a help defender. So Kevin Durant is going to have to step up big time, but he's shown he's capable of it. As long as he can stay healthy, he can do the job.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And there's going to be, as we said when we opened up this divisional discussion, there's going to be a lot of mobility in this division. We do think that it's going to be probably Lakers, Dubs, and Phoenix 1, 2, 3. Sac probably drops to the 4, and Clippers probably drop to the 5. Last team in this division, let's talk about it. I saw some people talking about the Dubs really making a big push here this year. Finished last year 44-38, just horrendous on the road. One of, if not the biggest polarizations, home to road in league history. 33-8 at home, 11-30 on the road. And a lot of that was early season, and it was what we discussed before, the immature nature of guys like Jordan Poole, some younger guys just not traveling well, not bringing any mentality to road basketball. And I remember last year they had a road trip, and I believe they lost 6 or 7 in a row on the road. It was the first snapshot to this team is nothing like the team that had won the championship the year before. You take Poole off the roster, a couple of the young guys get another season of experience. You bring in Chris Paul. I've always liked Chris Paul from the standpoint of professionalism. I think at one point in his life, in the next 5 to 10 years, he probably will be an NBA coach. The guy is so well crafted in that. I like upward movement for the Dubs this year. I don't think it's going to be huge due to the competitive parity in this division, but I think the Dubs are a buy team. We will make money betting the Dubs this year. Junior?
So I actually have a question for you. What do you think is going to happen with this Clay situation? And do you think that they should pay him big money?
You mean next year?
Yeah, because I mean, well, they have to figure it out now. They cannot wait until next year, right? So do you think his demands are reasonable, and what do you think they should do?
It's a great question. I think his demands are reasonable. Absolutely. I think he's performed at that level throughout his career. And there's a lot of other guys getting paid in that $40 million a year range, which honestly have not been nearly as clean in their career and shown the results, shooting the ball and in terms of the postseason. I do think they are at a crossroads, though, because obviously signing a guy who's, 33, 34 to a deal like that, you're going to get some bad back-end years, theoretically, at that price point. Reminds me more of baseball with these guys signing these 12 to 15-year deals where they're 40 years old getting paid $40 million. But, Steph Curry, I don't know. I think the one big unknown to that question, Junior, is I think that certain guys like Steph, obviously LeBron, Clay to a degree, they just train at a different level than guys did 25 years ago. So that maybe they do have better years in their late 30s than we think historically you had to cliff dive. So I think that, LeBron being the best example of this, the guy turns 39 in December and he's running around like he's 28. So I think that to disrupt this group is not in the nature of the front office with the Dubs. I think they want to keep them. I could see them signing him up and maybe trying to run it back for 3 or 4 years. But I think it's a really difficult discussion. Definitely not one that I'm well versed in.
Yeah, it's such a complicated conversation because now you're going to be paying both him and Draymond over market value on the back end of their careers, right? So you're not going to be able to dump those salaries. You're just going to basically have to eat. You're basically saying, I'm going to pay you guys retroactively for what you've done, where I think you guys can keep us in the now while we figure out how to plug the obvious holes that are about to pop up in the next 18 to 24 months. I don't think they have a choice but to pay Clay. What he means to the community, what he means to the team, I'm sure it's such a fucking complicated situation. But to answer your question directly, I think there's value on them. I think the fact that you saw in that preseason poll that nobody gave him a chance to win the title already shows that overall they're being underestimated. I think that there's value in the Dubs. It's definitely buy low season. I don't think, other than their injury-plagued seasons, this is the biggest buy low spot for them as a healthy roster since their pre-championship race.
Yeah, without question. Without question. I think that this is just going to be, there's going to be a lot of profitability this season because there's going to be teams like the Warriors, the Lakers. We talked about the Pacers, Pistons, teams that had shown signs at one point 2 years ago and then cliff dove last year. And also the Dallas Mavericks, as I mentioned. Just insane stuff. How low Dubs, Lakers, Mavericks, and others went last year off of deep runs the previous year and then now coming back. Great buy stuff. And as you mentioned, retroactive payment is a very real thing in basketball. And I think the Warriors, as you mentioned, there's not a better plan. Like, what are you going to do? Gut the roster and start over with rookies when you still have Clay and Steph in their mid 30s? Like, Michael Jordan was winning titles at 36. I mean, like, I think it's a no brainer. There's just no way around it. Like, you got to do it.
They have no choice. It just is what
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. And that's wrapping up the conversation, an hour and 41 minutes. We didn't think we were going to get this long, but the detail is there. The conversation is real. We appreciate you guys staying with us for $1.40. We'll be sharing this on Twitter this afternoon. This is the beginning of NBA Payday, the Shark and Junior Brown. We will be on here 2 to 3 times a week, and we're also doing a show with BetUS TV. I'm dropping 6 official plays. I will recap them right now. Pistons win total over 27.5. Rockets win total over 31.5. Pacers win total over 38.5. And Mavericks win total over 43.5. Lakers to win the Pacific plus 350. Second Pacific plus 300. We appreciate you guys immensely. Junior, it was a pleasure. Close them out with just a few words, and we will sign off this first pilot episode, and the broadcast is real.
Yeah, so like Shark mentioned, we're going to be doing some spots on BetUS TV, their basketball show. We're going to do, I think, one day together. Then there's a couple of days where Shark's on with a couple other guys. I'm with a couple other guys. But the point is, this specific show that me and Shark have been talking about for a while, we just want to have conversations surrounding basketball so that, or let me just say this in a different way. I've been in this business for years. I've worked at books. I've worked doing consulting work for books. The only way to beat the numbers is to gather information. Every bookmaker, every bettor is at an information deficit. And we're just trying to provide y'all with as much information as possible so that when you invest your money, because we don't gamble around here, we invest our money in picks. When you invest your money, you get some returns. That's it. That's all. No BS. That's straight to the business. Let's get it, Shark. Let's make this fun.
Damn right. We appreciate you guys so much. Sending the best vibes. Thursdays are thrifty and powerful. Sharky Waters Nation, 9 words of lifestyle. Ride the wave or get out of the water. We will be back next week. Tuesday's the opener. Let's dominate.